Three tomatoes are walking down the street. Papa tomato, mama tomato, and baby tomato.
Playing Catch-Up presents.
Starring Lindsay Hinkle and Jamie Nelson.
So this is Playing Catch-Up, is it? I prefer something with a little more kick.
Everybody's favorite condiment-themed entertainment podcast.
Put some hot sauce on my burrito, baby!
Hot sauce.
Nobody puts ketchup on a hot dog.
Welcome to Hot Sauce on PlainKetchup.com. I'm Jamie Nelson, and with me, my co-host, Lindsay Hinkle. What have you been up to this week, Lindsay?
Last night, I was hanging out with my parents, and we were watching this show called Doomsday Preppers. Have you ever seen it?
Never heard of it.
So basically, they follow these people around who are absolutely convinced that the world is going to end in the near future. Like this one woman, her thing is that she wants to be able to make gourmet foods, even if the world ends. So she's also put up like solar panels around the perimeter of her house to get the electricity that she needs to make her gourmet food. She has guns hidden all over the house. So every night, her and her husband run drills where they go around the house in the dark, knocking on surfaces in Morse code to tell each other, like, that the room is clear. They were terrified of people finding out that they had all these stockpiles of food, and they were practicing to kill pretty much anybody who came onto their property. But then, at the same time, they were educating their community. So their community all knows that they have all this food and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so when they come to you for help, are you going to shoot them or are you going to help them?
Right.
And I'm wondering, okay, so when National Geographic shows up at these people's houses, they let these people into their homes and show them their deepest, darkest, craziest secret, you know. Do they know that America is pretty much laughing at them?
Maybe they are, because I just read this book called Them.
Like that horrible movie we saw in high school?
No, it's not that one, no. It's actually Jon Ronson. He goes around and he hangs out with a bunch of different kinds of extremists. So, like, he hangs out with the KKK, and the KKK is all like, look at our hoods that we have on our new costumes. They have a very different lining than the old-style hoods. And it's like, it really happened, but he puts it in, like, a really humorous light. And I'm reading it, I'm like, did the KKK read this book, and do they realize they're being made fun of, or are they like, oh yeah, that happened, like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, I don't know, like, I guess people have to have a sense of humor about, like, themselves, like, I know I do, I know you do, but the thing is, like, when people are that crazy about something, I kind of wonder what their sense of humor is like.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyway, so I had this idea. Everyone wants their 15 minutes of fame, right?
Right.
And I had an idea of how we can get ours.
Go on.
So I'm going to get, Luke and Nicole and Ashton and all of our friends, and you too, obviously.
The band?
What? No, you. Puns are the worst, man. The plan is for us to get famous. We're all going to get together, and we're going to prepare for the zombie apocalypse. We're going to, find some remote cabin. And we're going to get a bunch of treadmills. So we're working on our cardio. We're going to have weapon training in the back. We're going to have a lot of food. And we're going to try to find a way to fashion some, like, suits that zombies can't bite through. Because I think that would really make us crazy enough to put us over the edge and get us on the show.
So we're going to be on treadmills and fancy suits. Basically, we're going to be in an OK Go video.
Yeah. Maybe we should start a band.
I think that's a good segue to introduce our guest.
We're in the attic now with conspiracy theory. No.
Well, that was on the Big Breakfast.
I just finished reading that book, sorry. No, we're here with author, journalist, and documentary maker Jon Ronson. How are you, Jon?
Yeah, I'm fine. A little hoarse. I've been recording an audiobook all day. At Audible in Newark. So I've been commuting to Newark, New Jersey, which isn't as an Englishman. That sounds mysterious and glamorous, but in reality isn't that mysterious or glamorous.
Why don't you tell us about the book?
Yeah, it's a collection called Lost at Sea. And the title comes from a story I wrote about a woman who went missing on a Disney cruise, and there was kind of inferences that Disney covered up what they knew to protect the image. And so the Guardian sent me undercover on a Disney cruise to try and, on the Disney cruise, on the same route and the same ship that she disappeared from, to try and investigate. And I took my son, because which the Guardian wouldn't pay for. So I spent all my money on taking my son, but I kind of thought I can't be like a man on my own on a Disney cruise, no one's gonna. So plus I'd be incredibly miserable. Anyway, that's what the book's called. But I figured that all the people I write about in one way or another are lost at sea in some way. So yes, that's why it's called Lost at Sea, the idea that we're all trying to make our way in the world, and it felt like a sort of empathetic title, I suppose, the idea that we're all screwed, is that if you're going to start writing about eccentric or vulnerable, kind of fucked up or difficult people, you have to sort of admit your own frailties and weaknesses, or else you're doing it in a really patronising way. So when I say Lost at Sea, I sort of include myself in that.
Well, what's funny about your new book is, like, I knew you were writing a new one, I didn't know what it was, and I looked it up on Amazon last Saturday. My parents were on their first ever cruise last week. My brother and I both thought they were supposed to come back on Saturday. We didn't hear from them on Saturday. On the same day, I'm reading about, like, oh, someone goes missing on a cruise, and I was like, oh God.
Well, people go missing a lot from cruises. After doing that story, I'm amazed that anybody makes it to the other end. Such are the number of people who have gone missing. I came on the ship over here with my family and my dogs. We emigrated over here on the Queen Mary about 2 weeks ago. But no one, I think that was all fine.
Why don't you tell me about Frank?
Okay, well, I'm not going to say much because a couple of years ago I went to see this film, Let the Right One In, the Thomas Alfredson Swedish film, Let the Right One In, and I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what the genre was. I knew nothing, and the joy I felt of sitting there knowing nothing at all, and then the film unfolds, and it unfolds in completely different ways to the ways you expect it's going to unfold. You think it's going to be one sort of film, it turns into a completely different sort of film. It was just wonderful. And I thought, so when Frank got announced, I thought I'm never, I'm not going to tell anyone anything, because when I'm writing a script, I'm not thinking, okay, the viewers are going to know a certain amount as they walk into the cinema. I'm thinking they're going to know nothing on page 1, and then on page 2 they're going to learn the thing that I reveal on page 2, which of course is not true, because that's not how films work, but it's how I sort of want them to work in my before. But I'll tell you what I can
basically
tell.
There may or may not be someone named Frank.
Yeah.
No, go
exactly.
on.
Okay, there's someone called Frank, but it's not, as has been reported, based on a man called Frank Sidebottom, who was a comedy musician that I played with for 3 years in the 1980s. Frank was a really big inspiration to the film, and my time in Frank's band massively inspired the film. But the film isn't about Frank, even though we've called the lead singer Frank, which I can see now has created some confusion. It's a film about being in a band. It's a comedy, and it was written by me and Peter Strawn, who wrote the Men Who Stare at Goats screenplay and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. We started writing it in Puerto Rico. When they started filming the Men Who Stare at Goats, I was sitting at home in London on the internet, and I saw these paparazzi shots of George Clooney on a sun lounger at the hotel where they were all staying while they were filming the Men Who Stare at Goats. And I thought to myself, oh my God, they must be having unimaginable fun. They must it's a world I can't even imagine how amazing this world is. And so I phoned the producer and I said, I want to come over. And he said, okay. So I went there with Peter, and it turns out they're not having unimaginable fun. They're having hard work, 12-hour days, sitting there on a hot, film set, boring. So after the second day, I said to Peter, can we not go on the set today, please? And instead we sat by the pool and started talking about this film. And so we really started writing it there in Puerto Rico. And we've been writing it ever since. So it's been, 4 or 5 years we've been writing it. and they're gonna start filming it in like a couple of weeks with Michael Fassbender.
I saw that.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
And Donal Gleeson, who is on his way to becoming. He's just great. He's incredibly funny and nerdy, and just kind of perfect for the part that we wrote.
Very cool. I would like to talk a little bit about Escape and Control. Where does that stand? Or maybe you can give like a little introduction of what it is first.
Okay. It's okay. So what happened was I'll tell you what happened. Have you heard of Harry Hill? He's a British comedian. He's a funny British comedian. I'm trying to think of an American equivalent, but I'm not yet au fait enough with your culture to know that. But he's a British comedian. He's kind of a surrealist comedian, a bit like kind of Vic and Bob, but you may not know them either. But he's a surrealist British comedian. And I got a call from this guy called Justin Gaynor saying, I'm working with Harry Hill. He's making an internet-only television show, and one of the characters is his landlord, who's played by a wooden spoon, called Mr. Ronson. And we want you to know that Mr. Ronson is in no way associated with you. In no way have you influenced this character whatsoever, and you have no rights whatsoever to sue us for using your name, because this character, Mr. Ronson, has nothing to do with you whatsoever. However, we would like you to voice Mr. Ronson, and we'll pay you £200. So I said okay, mainly because I was really interested about meeting Harry Hill, because he's a bit of a kind of hero in Britain, and so I went in and voiced Mr. Ronson the Spoon. And in fact, if you want to, you can look it up. And it's called Harry Hill's Little Internet Show, and I'm Mr. Ronson. Anyway, I got talking to them, and what they do, they're a company that just do stuff on the internet, and they get sponsors to sponsor the whole thing, and the artist or the writer or whoever, the filmmaker, has complete control. And what's nice about it, and the reason why people like doing it, is because commissioning editors at TV companies can be really difficult. They can make you really jump through hoops and justify everything you do. And you go into a meeting with a TV company these days, and the whole vibe is, we don't want to do it. Try and convince us otherwise. And after a while, you just get sick of it. So they said, well, why don't you do a series for us and just do whatever you want and put it out on the internet, and it can be like kind of 4-minute chunks or 5-minute chunks or however, and it can be about anything. So that's how it came about.
Is that Channel Flip?
Channel Flip, yeah, that's what they're called. And so we did them, and it was about control of the internet. And because I thought if it's going to be on the internet, it should be about the internet, and I was really interested in, because the internet's this kind of uncontrollable thing, and I really like the idea of the sort of people who are used to controlling us. What do they do in this new situation? So that was the kind of starting point. And the first few were quite serious about astroturfing, about how the US health insurance companies will set up fake people to promote fake messages and so on, and sock puppetry, astroturfing. And then as the series went on, it got kind of crazier. And my favourite one was these guys set up these three academics, set up a spam bot on Twitter and called it Jon Ronson. But it culminates in me trying to get them to take down this Jon_Ronson spam bot, who people were thinking was me, and people were thinking I was like I'd turned into an idiot, because all this spam bot was like tweeting all the time, was I yum, lovely like lovely lemongrass soup for me tonight, and I'm going to a dinner party. I think I'm gonna bring some grouper. It was like recipes. It was just constant recipes, and celeriac, and it was just driving me nuts. And I've got to admit, when I was angry about something else, I would go on and see if this spam bot was still there. My chest would tighten, like I was going to have a heart attack. And so finally I said to them, look, if you won't take it down, because they were just refusing, maybe we can meet and you can explain to me, what it is that you're doing. And So they said okay, so we met, and it was an incredible hour. Yeah, so that was my favourite one. That was the one that sort of made it all worthwhile. In the end, what happened was some of them got like no views at all. The serious ones kind of got no views, but then there was one that got like, I don't know how many, but hundreds of thousands of views. And that was Patrice Wilson, the writer of Rebecca Black's Friday, said he was inspired by meeting me to write a song, and he sent me the song, and it was a song about the fact that I was going on the Conan show that night, and he wanted me to sing it on the Conan show, and that one did very well. Yeah.
So are there going to be more, or?
No one's asked me to do any more, so I guess not. I mean, saying that, I've been so busy with, I've just finished this Radio 4 series. I did this series called Jon Ronson On, and we've just finished the new series, and I'm trying to write a new book. I sort of think anything I do that distracts me from writing a new book, is a sort of, in the long run, a mistake. I should just be writing books. So that's what I'm going to try and do now. Lost at Sea is just a collection. So it's not, there is new stuff in there. There's probably, 5,000 or 10,000 words of new stuff, because when I was reading the pieces, I sort of couldn't help but sort of add to them. But it's basically a collection of previously published stuff.
Well, speaking of books, I'm interested in sort of like your writing process, since you do investigative journalism and nonfiction, which is not something I normally have any experience in. Like, I have a creative writing degree, but it's all fiction. Right. And now like I told you, I'm working on a project that's nonfiction, and it's sort of in its humor too, and it's sort of interesting to see, like, how do you, like, you have all of this reality, and you have to pinpoint certain things to tell your story and to tell it in a funny way, or to get whatever your point is across. I was wondering if you could maybe talk about how you do that, and if there are areas that you can sort of fudge a little bit, or like where that line is.
Well, I would say it's still on balance. Now that I've written a fictional film, Frank, I can compare the two. And I would say that on balance, it's easier to write non-fiction. That you said, like, the whole world in front of me, and how do I decide, But when you're writing a fiction, you realise you're walking through a door into a room, and there's fucking nothing in the room. It's like nothing. The room is completely empty, and you have to conjure things up. And I found that, really hard. After a while, as all fiction people say, it starts to gather its own momentum, and characters you've invented begin to feel more and more alive, and it becomes easier. But I did find it hard. But in terms of non-fiction, some of the questions that you asked, I think, are hard to answer, like finding the story. I find really hard to answer. I suppose I've got a few kind of criteria, and it doesn't always work out this way, but I do have a sort of formula that I think tends to work, which is if it's an absurd, funny story about a really serious thing, about something that has an impact on all of our lives. If it can be both of those things at once, and it can be sort of human, and you can empathise, and you can sort of learn something about why we behave in the ways that we do. If it's got all of that, then it tends to work. And in terms of like getting the momentum, and the thing I really like is when I've gathered all the material and I've transcribed it all. I don't like gathering the material that much. I don't like going off and interviewing people and having adventures, because I'm shy, and I find meeting strangers, quite stressful.
in the park.
Yeah, exactly. But it's worse because you know who I am. It's like I've already proved myself. It's like if I'm interviewing someone who doesn't know who I am, I just get shy and I sort of panic on it. So I find that stressful. But once I've got it all, and I've got, say, I don't know, for a 5,000 word story, maybe it starts at like 30 or 40 pages of kind of raw material, so transcripts of interviews, sort of observations, thoughts I've had along the way, and I sort of put them all into this sort of 40-page document, and then I start to whittle it down, and I always feel a little bit like a sculptor, sort of just whittling until it just feels like it's sort of flowing, and that's the thing I think I thank God I sort of, it's just something I'm good at. I sort of know when a paragraph is finished when when it's flowing well. But in terms of fudging, I don't think I do fudge. I think what I do is speed things up.
Okay.
You know, like an hour interview can come down to 30 seconds or a minute. So I cut out all the dead wood. But then in the psychopath test, which is the last book I wrote, I'm actually critical of people who do that, of people who just get the gems and sort of throw the boring, ordinary stuff away, and the gems are the outermost aspects.
Yeah. Well, I think like you were saying that like if someone that you were trying to prove was a psychopath didn't match something on the list, you're like, oh, I'm not going to put that in the book, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've always got to be careful, because you've always got to try and have a balance between making it fast and putting in the best bits. But just looking for the best bits is itself really problematic and somewhat tyrannical thing for a writer to do. You always have to try and sort of balance that out with remembering that you have to be completely fair and you have to be kind of human and empathetic and not be mean to people. So the two things I think are sort of happening at once during that process.
Is there any news on the Them movie?
Nah,
no news?
You know what? It's never going to happen.
Aww.
I'm like, you know what I'm like? I'm like Natasha Kampusch, the Austrian girl who was kidnapped as a child and locked in a dungeon for years and years. That's what Them is. Them is Natasha Kampusch. When Natasha Kampusch finally managed to escape, and Them will never escape. Them is just locked in some Hollywood dungeon until it's probably just dead already. That's probably an over-the-top analogy.
You don't want to say that, because the people who might have done it are going to be like, oh, John doesn't want to do it anymore.
No, I massively want to do it. I hugely want to do it. What happened was Mike White wrote a screenplay. I mean, films are really, it's a miracle that any film gets made. I mean, it's a miracle that Frank's getting made, and it was a miracle that The Men-in-State Goats got made. I mean, I can't believe that it's happened to me twice. Well, it hasn't happened to Frank yet. Anything could happen between. There's many a slip betwixt cup and the lip, as I can't remember who said that. It was Shakespeare.
Said Jon Ronson.
Yes, but Frank feels like it's past the point of no return. It feels like it will start filming. But it's a miracle that films get made. It's a bit like that walking into a room with the commissioning editor. There's so many reasons why not to make a film, and the main reason is that there's millions of ideas and projects out there, and Hollywood is full of clever people hustling. So the competition's like incredible. And also, there's no slot to fill. This is what somebody explained to me once. With television, there's a slot to fill. It's like you have to fill the 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. slot. With movies, there's no such slot. It's just one big hustle. And it's really expensive as well. I mean, the cheapest possible movie is like $1 million or $2 million. And that's a lot of money for someone to lose, for an investor to lose. And so I'm grateful, rather than pissed off that Them hasn't been made, I feel grateful that other films I've done have been made. But yeah, so Mike White wrote a screenplay that was really good. And Edgar Wright said he was going to direct it.
My favourite director.
Well, Edgar's great, which is why it's so heartbreaking. But then what happened was Edgar had like 3 projects, and the momentum for Scott Pilgrim was just greater than the momentum for Them. And then 3 years passed, because that's how long it takes you to film, and then release, edit, and then promote a film. It's just, and then 3 years later, Them suddenly feels like an old project from 3 years ago. So I think that's the reason why Them was never made.
Well, keep writing books, and maybe the next one.
Yeah, well, maybe Them will get made. Universal own it. It does make you think, well, if they own it, they might want to do something with it. I mean, it's great.
I mean, it doesn't really expire. I mean,
no, paranoia never. Paranoia never dies.
Paranoia.
Just ask me. Yeah.
Do you have any other projects or anything that you want to make sure the listeners hear about?
No, not really. I've just finished a very big story for American GQ, who I like very much. They let me do these really, really long stories that it's very hard to find a place for these days, and they let me do it. So I've just finished a big piece there. I've just finished my Radio 4 series, Jon Ronson on. One of the programmes I'm really happy with called Being Normal. Now I'm just going to try and start writing another book.
You can find Jon Ronson on jonronson.com, JONRONSON, and follow him on Twitter at Jon Ronson. Also check out youtube.com/plainketchup for the supplementary video that goes with this episode.
I'm on the Conan show.
This has been Hot Sauce, brought to you by plainketchup.com. Please subscribe, rate, and comment on iTunes. Check back every week for a new celebrity guest interview or hilarious video. You may also want to subscribe to our video channel on youtube.com/plainketchup. Sign up for our newsletter on plainketchup.com. Please like us on facebook.com/plainketchup and follow us on Twitter at plainketchup. Don't forget to support this project by buying Plain Ketchup swag at our Cafe Press store. Have a question? Email Jamie and Lindsay at gmail.com. That's JAIME and LINDSEY at gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay saucy.
Maybe we should start a band. You could have a rock soundtrack.
That wards off zombies. It has like subliminal messages that makes their brains explode.
Yeah. Oh, like in Hush in season 4, like when she's the. I don't know if you could tell, but when I made that little sound effect,
You put your hands near your head?
and pulled them outwards, pantomiming brains exploding.
Yes, I knew.